Hi, and welcome. That was a big hi. And welcome to a self-published author's diary. My name is Elodie Novodatsky. I have been self-publishing since the 26th of June 2014. Today's episode is behind the scenes of 3 days in a life of this self-published author, kind of writing, taxes, and DER. So I had different plans for this episode. I was going to maybe dive into the administrative part, and I will talk a little bit about it, of what is going on behind the scenes when you do an international move and you are a US citizen. I'm also a European citizen, but being a US citizen means that I also have to always file my taxes in the US, whether or not I'm a resident at the time of the US. So that has some certain implications for different things. But then in Belgium, things are also done a little bit differently. I have a lot of questions and I'm trying to find answers. So I will dig a little bit into that. I'm also going to talk about writing and some of my process and DER. I'm going to start with the ER because it's the freshest in my mind. And when you're a writer and you go to the ER, I have been to the ER, to the emergency room, quite a few times as an author, because I've been an author for quite a few years now. And also I had cancer back when I was in treatment, going to the ER, which unfortunately I had to do quite a bit because I was getting fever every second cycle that I was on, and at the time it was AVD plus brentuximab, that particular protocol I'm talking about. But the brentuximab was giving me fevers, but not all the time, because every 2 times I would get a shot to help my white blood cells. And when I got that shot, I didn't have fever. So we ended up doing it every time, even though my white blood cells may have been mostly fine. It just helped me not go to the ER anymore. And I've just realized that I wrote a nurse who worked in the ER. She was not working on the oncology floor, but she was working in the ER. And I do have experience in the ER as a patient, but also observing, what's happening and the way the nurses made my life so much easier. Most of the time, like 99% of the time, they made my life so much easier. And I had one at the Glen Burnie Hospital and called me Bebe every time I would come in. So again, I went I think 3-4 times in the span of maybe 2 months. That one particular nurse would call me Bebe. She always made me smile. And then there were other nurses that were also very just funny and fun, and just making sure that I was getting the care that I needed. When I went to the ER, when I had cancer, I had a little card that said that I was at risk of infection. So I would usually be triaged pretty quickly. It doesn't mean that I would get into a room right away, but it would mean that I would be out of the crowd. Like one time, I think we even called ahead, or somebody from maybe the University of Maryland called ahead saying I was going to go because I had called first the patient line. And one time I also went not because of a fever, but because I had tachycardia. My heart rate was 180, 190, maybe even 200 at that time. And I could not bring it down by myself. And we called 911. The ambulance came, the firefighters, it was an entire thing. And they brought me to the ER. And so I also discovered the way that how it is when you arrive yourself versus when you arrive with the ambulance. And here again, everybody was great. They managed with some vasovagal maneuvers in the ambulance to bring my heart rate down. So I did not need adenosine, which is cold, which I needed later when I was doing transplant. Looking back, if I had done that episode right after those ER visits, I probably would have talked more about the fear and everything else. Let's be clear, because there were moments when I went to the ER where I was waiting for a scan because they had to make sure I didn't have any problem with my lungs or stuff like that. And I was always freaking out because then, of course, on the scan, you see if there is maybe something changes in terms of tumors and things like that. The perspective does change a little bit. And I talk about this a little bit later about how I did try to find things that were good, but at the same time, when you're right in the moment, sometimes it is more difficult to find. So I just want to preface this because I'm adding this little bit, and I know what I'm going to say after as I'm editing. I forgot about the tachycardia episode with the ER, and I wanted to make sure that I brought that in, but I'd also explain that when I mentioned later about finding the small things. Sometimes it's easier than others. I just want to say that. And I think it goes with writing too, just to bring that back into writing. There are moments in writing that are hard, that are harder than others. Not everything, I feel, at least in my experience, not everything comes super easy. There are moments in the drafting that I love. And then there are moments where I'm like, ugh. And it's the same for revising. There are moments that I absolutely love revising. I think it depends also on like the energy level. It depends on where I am in the revision process, where I am in the drafting process, where I am in everything. So it's not always easy, but I do find it also when it comes to writing that trying to find the thing that I'm looking forward to, or the moment that I'm looking forward to, or things like that, or how to make sure. I've been thinking a lot about my readers right now when I revise, and how to make it even better for them in general, not like one particular readers, but also me as a reader. Things where I'm like giggling and kicking my feet when I'm reading, stuff like that. So, and the ER stories continue because the US ER stories is just one part. I also went to France and to Belgium. Then I went to the ER in France for in January, so I was no longer a cancer patient. I went in January because I fell down the stairs and split my elbow open and needed stitches. One of my sisters took me to the ER in Clermont in France. There were quite a few people, and I did not wait that long to be triaged. The nurses, again, were great. I was seen afterwards. It was like, I think the trip lasted like maybe 6 hours total. I needed 3 stitches. I needed an x-ray. So I observed different things. But in that case, it was hard, not only because my elbow, but because it was at a time my dad was at the hospital and I wanted to go see him. And then I was not able to go see him that day. I saw him on Saturday and I saw him the day before. But I had a lot of different emotions on that day. So maybe I was not as observant, even though if I remember a few things. And I remember how also like the patients that we were waiting in a hallway before we got into a room. I remember the camaraderie, like how we were watching out for one another. Like it was a very friendly atmosphere between the different patients waiting on the for a room there. That was nice. I mean, those are moments. It sounds weird, right? But I don't know if I was always like that or if I became more like that during treatment. I have no idea. But finding little things where that's nice. People, yeah, you're in a crappy situation, but there are moments that are just a light a little bit. And I like finding those moments. That's what I remember from that trip. In addition of being very just, again, all the emotions around it. That was a hard day. It was also, I remember the doctor who was the only doctor in the ER because it was between Christmas and New Year. I think she was maybe there were 2 doctors, maybe I'm not, but she was managing the entire thing. She was the Dr. Robbie, if you watched a bit. I think she was the Dr. Robbie of the ER, and she was pretty young and she was great. I think I'm realizing that I put some of that, not that particular event because that happened after I wrote Nice Guys Don't Kiss Like That at Christmas. I wrote some of those moments of what I think also when I see nurses interact with one another and I see the doctors interact and I have this experience at the hospital that I think I definitely brought into my writing. And that's something I might add in Cancer Is Not My Brand, the book that is now up for pre-order. What a wonderful way to announce that my book is up for pre-order. Such a nice segue. It's available for pre-order on different e-retailers. I will put the link in the show description. And that was the experience. And then yesterday I had to go to the ER in Belgium. My husband took me at like 6:45 a.m. because I had hives. I had hives on Tuesday. Watch and wait a little bit. Hate that term. I mean, I don't hate that term, but it brings me back to the watch and wait in scans. So it's loaded for me, that expression, watch and wait. But when I woke up in the morning, I had more hives than I did the day before. And my lower lip started feeling very tight and it was swollen. Not super swollen, but it was starting to swell. See, I had made an appointment with my primary care physician, but it was during the afternoon. It was 6:30 in the morning. So the chemical engineer brought me to the ER and stayed with me, which is something he has also done a lot throughout many years. We arrived and there was nobody there. So that's the first ER experience I've ever had where I arrived in an emergency room and nobody is waiting. So I got seen and like registered right away. And then I waited in a room. Nurses came in, put an IV on. The doctor came pretty quickly. They did some blood tests. And then I'm fine. And it was probably either an allergic reaction to something or a viral rash because I had bronchitis and laryngitis 10 days, 2 weeks before. And so it could just be that. Because we had been watching The Pit, there could be, I think some people in that ER could play in The Pit, but the experience was very different than The Pit because it was not as crowded. They told us that people would start coming in at 10 a.m. most likely. But that means that yesterday, and that's bringing it back to writing, they gave me a paper saying to give to my employer that I was not able to work today. Yeah, but I have so many things. I have things I want to do. I had prepared a newsletter. I wanted to do a lot of things. I do take rests during the day. It's not like I'm always go, go, go. There are certain days where I might be go, go, go. But sometimes I know I might need a nap, so I take the time to take a nap, a little bit of a rest during the day. If you speak Gallup strength, and you may have heard me say that before, I'm a number one achiever. I need to do things. But I'm also good at just being on the couch and watching something without doing anything else. Yesterday, when I started watching Pretty Little Liars, which I had started watching before, but I have never really watched the entire thing. I did go to the pharmacy, so I needed to pick up some steroids and some antihistamines that I need to take for a few days. And then I had that appointment on my primary care physician at 2:30 p.m., which I kept so she could see what it looked like and have it in my file. I took a nap in between. I also ate because I had not eaten in the morning. Did a few things in the house, but then I basically just sat down again and watched TV. I told myself that it was okay because I had a paper from the hospital that I didn't need to work. So all that to say, today, no writing happened. I did not send any newsletter. The reason why I'm also a little bit more, I absolutely need to write and I need to revise and I need to do things, which by the way, right now I'm talking to you, I'm not writing or revising, but it's in the back of my mind. I am thinking about what I'm going to be revising this morning and this afternoon, is because I moved the date for my Christmas wish list. I changed the pre-order to the end of July because there was no way I could revise it, send it to a copy editor, get it back. There was just no way. And it was interesting because just a couple of days before I was talking to an author friend about, we need to do more about health things, maybe. I had just listened to Big Sime's latest podcast episode, the Quidcast, on health for writers, because we sit a lot and different things that we could be doing, or habits we could try to take to make sure that we stay healthy. I will link that particular Quidcast into the podcast description. That was my day. Yesterday on Monday, I did quite a bit of writing and revising, and I also went grocery shopping in the morning. So that's time that it's taking away from my focus on revision, but also I was able to revise. I think it was since the beginning of the week, except yesterday, I revised about 3 chapters. I am digging deeper into the characters. I'm also revising to make sure that it's even more them, it's even more in their voices. And I don't know if I told you that last week, but I ended up adding a prologue chapter, or I still call it a prologue, but it's a different one. I've been revising that quite a bit. And I'm very happy with it now because I feel like it really works out. I've been doing things more into their own experience, making it more precise so that the character is even more real. So I'm linking it more. So let's say if I'm talking about the worst and the best, this was the worst and the best. What I'm going to talk, which is not what is in the book, but I'm going to talk about maybe their worst experience in one sentence or their best experience in one sentence to make them more 3-dimensional. Because they are people, right? I mean, you want readers to root for the person, you want people to feel with the person, and you want people to feel like they know the person they're reading about, right? That they're real people, that they can really engross themselves in the story. And I think those little moments really help. I know about, Save the Cat for empathy. And I think it was because Simon was talking about empathy and sympathy. Somebody was talking about empathy and sympathy on the first few pages. And I feel like the sympathy and empathy comes also from really being the head of the characters. So to try to take away the distance. And for me, sometimes it's also the gut feeling that I cannot ignore. It's a moment where I'm like, that doesn't feel right. This needs to be a little bit either deeper or more them. Also, the very fun part for me when it comes to writing my Christmas wish list is that I added Plato to the Christmas wish list. He's the beagle that Liam adopted. Bringing Plato, and if you're new to the podcast, Plato was our dog who we had we adopted him in 2015, and we had to say goodbye in 2025. So we had him for more than 10 years, and he was 12 and a half when we had to say goodbye. I was already writing my Christmas wish list because I had started writing my Christmas wish list probably in 2024 even. I released Nice Guys, Don't Kiss Like That at Christmas in November 2025. My Christmas wish list was in between because I sometimes write more than one books at once, which is something I'll talk about at some point in my process. And I'll mention Susan Dennard had a Substack post about that. I think she does the same thing, to write more than one book at once, because there are sometimes the things that you think you should be doing in terms of writing and the things that work for you. My schedule doesn't look like Stephen King's schedules or writing, even though I should really adopt his thing about walking first in the morning. That might be good. See, I should. I don't know. I'm going to think about it. As I was saying, my Christmas wish list has Plato in it because when I was writing it, and we had to say goodbye to Plato, which was also in the middle of selling our house in the US. It was a very hard time. He had chronic pancreatitis, and it was just not good anymore for him. And so it was a hard time. But because it was such a difficult time, writing was also very difficult because it's hard for me to write when there are kind of traumatic moments. Yeah, those moments that are just very, very sad and devastating and heartbreaking. Sometimes it's hard to write. Like, it's just my mind is not there. Talking about that, there is a podcast, that episode that I'm really recommended if you're going through grief yourself, or if you know somebody or a writer who's going through grief. Johanna Penn has a podcast episode with Jamie Albright, Writing Through Grief and Rebooting an Indie Author Business. It was really powerful. I think that's the term that I'm looking for. When you're going through your own grief and you hear somebody, a writer who has gone through grief for something. She lost one of her sisters to cancer. And having had just lost my dad from pancreatic cancer, listening to her made me feel seen in a way, and also impactful, I think, is even a better word than powerful when I listen to this podcast episode, because the way she talks about writing and reinventing and just honoring also her sister and her grief in a certain way. Yes, I found it very impactful. And I bought her book, and I'm looking forward to reading it because it's a book that seems filled with life in a way, and grief as well, I'm sure. So yeah, if you have not listened to this podcast episode, I really highly recommend it, or I recommend checking Jamie Albright's website. I will add the link to this podcast description as well. Both of the links, both the episode and her link to the book. You also change as a person throughout your writing career. Like, you're not writing the same way. I'm not writing the same way I was writing 10 years ago. And when I'm saying the same way, I think my style has changed a little bit. My characters have changed. I switched from contemporary romance, YA, romantic thrillers, YA, new adult a little bit, but not as steamy. And then the rom-coms, and then my pen name, which is Spicy Forbidden, and then Mafia I also did. But it's not, like right now I don't have time for my pen name, so that's kind of standby. And then I have the bilingual books. And I'm not saying that, for example, I'm going to write the third in the Nick and M series, and that's going to be the same voice, but it's not exactly change in all those years. I've been through a lot of different things that I think build on who I was. Like, it's not, I'm no longer exactly the same person, but I've been to therapy a lot during those years too. And I think that's informed some of the way that I'm writing. The writing Plato in my Christmas wish list helped me get back into the writing, because I was able then to honor him in a way, and I was able to bring him into the story. He is humping pillows the way that Plato was. He is very stubborn the way I think pretty much every beagle is. He is adorable. He barks a lot. He's very cuddly. He doesn't have seizures. He may have seizures. I don't know yet. I don't know if the seizures will fit the story. But Plato had seizures, which were then under control. Maybe he takes medication for his seizures as well, the dog, in the book. But he has different nickname. And one of his nicknames is Poopy, which was one of the nicknames of Plato. Bringing him into my Christmas wish list is also great fodder for the comedy part also of the rom-com, because when you have a beagle, there are some funny things that can happen. And then Grace, the daughter that Liam didn't know he had, brings a cat with her. And the cat is pretty much mirrored on Bobby Voltaire. That's not his name. The name of the cat is Poop. But, so it's Poop and Poopy. It's something that helps me get back into the story. And right now, because I started writing the book, and I had quite a few chapters already without Plato in the book. When I'm revising right now, I have to make sure that I bring Plato back, because in different scenes, because a dog will inform the scene. You know, when you're picturing a scene on the big screen, the small screen, whatever, you have to know where all the characters are, right? Like when you're writing a scene, and for example, it's a scene in the restaurant and like the two main characters are talking. Yeah, I'm not saying after every sentence, you're not going to add, and now the waitress, like whatever. But at some point, the waitress, especially if you are writing a book set up in the US and it's a restaurant in the US, the waiter or the waitress will come and ask how everything is. They're going to will come and ask if you need anything else, if you would like a refill. There are certain things that will happen. And then that can also bring more realness to your story as well, right? Because the waiter or the waitress is their own person, right? So they may have a way of talking, or they may have something they do with their hands. And it's not saying that it will take the whole focus of the scene, but it might bring just a little bit of something to the scene that will make it more real to the reader and more real to the characters as well on the page. I think that those little details, like to me, they matter a little bit when I'm writing. And I will have to think if I'm looking at that when I'm reading, or if I'm just so engrossed into the story. But there will be different smells, there will be different texture, and maybe it can inform the story. If they're in a diner and the table is all shiny, that could be a contrast to the conversation they're having, or it could be the same theme as the conversation they're having, and one of the characters could think about it, or could tap their index finger on the shiny table. I'm tapping my finger on the table right now. So all those things I feel matter when you're writing the scene placement. And so when you have a dog, in the scene, and especially if you have a dog like Plato, unless he's snoring away on his back with his legs up in the air, or I used to call him a cuddle bug. So unless he's like the cuddle bug against you, or he's like nesting. Plato used to nest a lot, and he would just like dig into the covers and then put himself in. So he is doing something, or he could chew on something, or he could be sleeping. But if he's sleeping, fine. But if there's a new person arriving on the scene, or if there is tension in the scene, the dog will sense some of it, and he might do something. Or the dog, like if there's a cat, well, the dog now needs to be somewhere else, because otherwise if the dog just disappears from the page, then there's a cat, then the dog reappears. It can be very jarring to have certain things happening if there is no continuity. And again, I'm not talking about adding a paragraph of what you're doing with the dog, but like for me right now, when Grace arrives at the door and she has the cat carrier, and now Liam has to hold the dog back, which also creates a more dynamic scene. And then he puts him into the living room where he has like sliding doors that he can actually close like it's mostly open, but he can close it. And so then Plato is behind the door and he starts scratching a little bit on the door. I don't have to repeat the fact that he's scratching on the door. At some point he might settle down, but basically he is more present, but that changes the scene dynamics. So that's for the revision for the very first chapters where I had started adding him. But as I'm revising, I'm realizing there are certain times where we don't know where Plato is and then he reappears. Well, that cannot work. He needs to be added to the different scenes. If he needs to be there, sometimes he's not, but it's creating a different texture. And I feel like that makes the book so much better, so much stronger. So I did a lot of that on Monday and Tuesday. In addition to doing a lot more for administrative things, I have, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, the taxes in Belgium. I'm trying to figure out a few VAT things. I called somebody on Monday and not at the Ministry of Finance, but at the Belgian, like there's a Finmin help number that you can call. You could choose to speak either, I think the 3 official languages in Belgium. So I spoke to somebody in French who helped me, gave me an email. So I wrote to the email and now I'm waiting to hear what they're going to say. It takes quite a bit of time. And I think once I have figured it out, it will be easier. But as I have not figured it out, it still occupies a little bit of my brain as I'm thinking of all the things that I still need to do for that. So those are the few days. And also I spend a lot of time talking about the Christmas wish list, but those are the few days of this self-published author's life in Belgium right now. And I wanted to thank you so much for listening, because I was checking my stats on Spotify the other day. So if you're listening on Spotify, I can see where people are listening from. I can also see it on Apple Podcast. The other ones, if you're listening from them, I also thank you very much. And please do let me know where you're listening from by sending me an email. You can send me an email at Elodie, which is the easiest one, I think. It's Elodie, E-L-O-D-I-E, at elodienow.com. I think it's the easiest email to remember. When I'm looking at the analytics for Spotify, you are listening to me from around the world, which I am so very grateful about. I have from the US, from Belgium, I think that's my husband. From Belgium, I think it's Alex. Thank you, Alex, for listening. I have listeners from Nigeria, Germany, hi Gisela, Hong Kong, France, probably my mom, hi mom, United Kingdom, South Africa, Greece, Iran, Japan, Denmark, Argentina, Peru, South Korea, Finland, Italy, Republic of Lithuania, India. Those are listeners that listen to me from all those different countries. And then on Apple Podcast, I have listeners from the US, from Australia, Italy, Germany. It's wild to me to know that you all are listening to me from all around the world. And I am so very grateful to you. All those numbers is somebody taking the time to press play and taking the time to listen to what I'm saying. For my episodes are between 15 and 45 minutes, I think. Thank you. Really means a lot to me. And I hope it's entertaining or informative or all of the above. And thank you. I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. I hope your socks are fluffy, and if you're writing, that the words are flowing if you need them to flow, or that you're figuring things out if you need to think about them. If you're reading, I hope you have a book that you can get lost into. If you're currently listening to a nonfiction, I hope it's interesting and keeps your attention. And yes, so to all writers out there, happy writing. And to everyone, happy reading.